Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 30th of July 2021 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today have been presented on the screen. Time stamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. See, most of the articles in today's editorial page have already been covered by us in the previous DNS videos. That is why we will not be focusing upon the editorial related articles. We are focusing upon the other important articles from the perspective of the UPSC examination. Let us begin our today's analysis. The first article in today's analysis appears on page number 9. The article is titled as Amended Factoring Regulation Bill Passed. See, in September 2020, that is last year, the government had introduced the Factoring Regulation Amendment Bill 2020. On July 29, 2021, that is yesterday, the Parliament has finally passed this particular bill. So since this bill has been finally passed by the Indian Parliament, this becomes quite important from the perspective of the UPSC examination. See, this particular topic is actually not important from the perspective of the mains examination. This topic is mainly important from the perspective of the prelims examination. So from the perspective of the UPSC prelims examination, certain things that you must understand here are, first and foremost, you must understand as to what exactly do you mean by the invoice factoring, the concept of the trades platform, and the Factoring Regulation Amendment Bill, its rationale and the benefits. So with respect to this particular bill, there is no need for it to get into the details of what are the provisions of this particular bill, since they are basically technical in nature. But what is more important is you must understand as to why this particular bill was introduced in the first place and how this particular bill would benefit us. So you should basically focus upon the rationale and benefits rather than the technical provisions of this particular bill. So once we understand all of these aspects related to the Factoring Regulation Amendment Bill, we'll come back and solve these two prelims questions for the practice. Now, if you look at the contribution of the MSME sector to the Indian economy, the MSME sector accounts for 28% of India's GDP, 45% of our manufacturing output, and 40% of our overall exports. More importantly, the MSME sector is the second largest employer after the Indian agriculture. Obviously, the MSME sector faces a number of challenges and concerns. But if we were to identify the two most important challenges, they would be, first one, lack of access to finance, and second one would be the delayed payments. See, both these two challenges are actually interrelated to each other. Let's understand how. See, usually the MSMEs, they provide for goods and services to various buyers such as the corporate buyer, government department, PSUs, etc. So when they provide for these goods and services to these buyers, the MSMEs do not get immediate payment. They may get the payment after say 3 months, 4 months or 6 months, depending upon the contract which has been signed between the MSME and these buyers. So when an MSME provides for these goods and services to a buyer, for the provision of these goods and services, the MSME would then generate an invoice. The invoice here can be considered to be a kind of trade receivable. The invoice here will carry the details of the transactions, which can include the quantity of goods supplied to a particular buyer, what is the total amount of these goods or the value of these goods, and more importantly, it will carry the due date. That is, when are these buyers required to make the payment to MSME, and as I said before, it could be say after 3 months, 4 months or 6 months. So let's understand as to how it is going to affect the finances of MSME. Now let's say there is a particular MSME X in the textile manufacturing. Now this particular MSME X, let's say it has a working capital of rupees 1 lakh. Now it has used this entire working capital of rupees 1 lakh to supply say textiles to a particular corporate buyer, let's say in this particular case, the lifestyle company. Now, this lifestyle company may be making the payment for these textile, say after 3 months or say after 4 months. So the problem which arises before the MSME here is this MSME X has used its entire working capital of rupees 1 lakh to manufacture these textiles. So this MSME right now does not has any working capital. So its overall cash inflows has got reduced. And if its cash inflows has got reduced, obviously it will not be in a position to make investment to manufacture more textiles, and this will in turn reduce its ability to get new orders from new customers. So here the overall financial position of the MSME would deteriorate. Now let's say you are an entrepreneur of this particular MSME X. What options do you have? See, first and foremost, what you can do here is you can go and take loan from a particular bank. But here the problem is you may be able to get loan at a higher rate of interest. Apart from that, that bank here may take huge amount of time to approve this particular loan. So the bank can approve this loan say after 1 month. So for at least a period of 1 month, you are not having any kind of working capital. So what is the other option for you? The other option which can be used by you is selling of these invoices. So as it is here, you're going to get this money from the lifestyle company say after 3 months, for which you have an invoice. So this invoice, you can sell it to a third party entity. For example, you can sell it to a bank or you can sell it to a NBFC. So by selling it to a bank or a NBFC, you can get immediate cash. So usually here when the MSMEs sell their invoices, these invoices are sold at a discount. Now for example, in this particular case, let's say you have an invoice of rupees 100. It means that you are going to get rupees 100 from the lifestyle company after 3 months. Now this invoice, you can sell it to a bank at a discount. Let's say here you can sell it at rupees 95. So by selling at a discount, you are getting an immediate cash of rupees 95. The remaining amount you can get it after a period of 3 months from this particular entity. As to how it is going to work, I will be discussing that in the next slide. So basically, with respect to factoring of invoices, we have three entities which are involved. One, seller, which is the MSME, which sells these invoices. Then we have the buyers of goods and services, which include corporate entity, government department, PSU. And then the financiers, which basically includes banks, a specific category of NBFCs known as the NBFC factors, and so on. So as you can see in the factoring of invoices, we have basically three players which are involved. So there is a need to bring all of these three stakeholders on a single platform. So that platform is the Trade Receivables Discounting System platform. Right now in case of India, the RBI has given approval to three TREDS platform. The first one is the Receivables Exchange of India. Second one is Invoice Smart. And third one is Mint Online Exchange. So in case of India, if any entity has to operate a TREDS platform, such an entity would have to take prior approval from the Reserve Bank of India. So in the year 2014, the RBI has come out with a detailed guidelines related to the TREDS platform. So an entity would be required to fulfill the RBI's guidelines. Apart from that, out of these three TREDS platform, the most important platform happens to be the Receivables Exchange of India. It was incorporated in the year 2016 and it is basically a joint venture between SIDBI, that is Small Industries Development Bank of India, and National Stock Exchange. So having understood the basics, let us now understand the flow of the invoice factoring. That is, how does the invoice factoring actually work? See, as highlighted before, the TREDS platform basically brings three stakeholders on a single platform. These include the sellers, that is the MSMEs, buyers, and the financiers. So here initially a MSME will sell its goods and services to a buyer in accordance with the contract. Later on, in accordance with the contract, it will generate an invoice. This invoice will then carry the details of the transaction, such as how much goods has been supplied by this MSME, what is the total value of the goods, and more importantly, what is the due date. So once this particular invoice is generated, this invoice would then be uploaded onto the TREDS platform. Upon being uploaded, this particular invoice will be made available to all the financiers. So the financiers would then be able to have a look at this invoice. They'll get to know as to what is the total value of goods which has been supplied by a particular MSME. They'll also get to know about the due date. So based upon this particular invoice, now different financiers would place their bid. So here they are placing a bid as to how much money they are willing to pay upfront against this particular invoice. Now let's say here Bank A is willing to pay 85% of the invoice amount. Now let's say in this particular case the invoice amount is equal to rupees 100. So the Bank A is willing to offer rupees 85 to the MSME. Bank B is willing to offer rupees 88, and a particular NBFC factor it is willing to offer rupees 90 against this particular invoice whose value is equal to rupees 100. So from the perspective of MSME, it is profitable for the MSME if it sells this particular invoice to the NBFC factor, because here it is getting the highest amount as an initial amount. So here the MSME would sell the invoice to the highest bidder, in this particular case the NBFC factor. So here what happens is the MSME is then transferring its risk of receiving the payment to this NBFC factor X. So as and when the due date appears, let's say after 3 months. So after 3 months, this NBFC factor will place this invoice before the buyer. So the buyer would then be required to pay this amount to the NBFC factor X. So after a period of 3 months, the NBFC factor X would receive an amount which is equal to the invoice amount. So as highlighted before, this NBFC factor X has already paid 90% of the invoice amount, which in this case is rupees 90. Later, after a period of 3 months, when it receives this entire amount from the buyer, it will deduct its own commission. It will deduct its own processing cost. Let's say it is deducting rupees 1. So after deducting its own commission, after deducting its own processing charges, it will pay the remaining amount to the MSME. So here it will pay the remaining amount of rupees 9. So as you can see, the total amount which is received by the MSME in this particular case would be rupees 99. Rupees 1 is paid in the form of commission or say processing cost to this NBFC factor. So as you can see here, the TReDS platform, it is a win-win-win situation. That is, it is beneficial for all the three stakeholders who are involved. For the perspective of MSMEs, the MSMEs would be able to get immediate cash against their invoice. This is considered to be much cheaper and easier in comparison to bank loan. They will be able to transfer the risk to the factoring entities, in this particular case, the NBFC factor X. So in future, if this buyer is unable to make the payment, then the entire risk would fall on this NBFC factor. Further, as discussed before, the NBFC's working capital will get freed up. They will be able to make higher investment and hence get more orders from the new customers. As far as the buyers are concerned, for the buyers, they will have a flexibility to make the payment at a later date. So here, when the MSME is generating an invoice and the due date is 3 months, here the buyers would get 3 months time to make the payment to this NBFC factor X. As far as the financiers are concerned, that is say banks, NBFC factors, etc. First and foremost, it will enable the banks to meet their priority sector lending targets. As you know, the RBI has come up with the PSL targets, wherein according to RBI, even the micro, small and medium enterprises are also considered to be one of the priority sectors. So here, when the banks are buying the invoices from the MSMEs, such buying of invoices can be considered to be part of the priority sector lending targets by the banks. Apart from that, both banks as well as NBFC factors, they will be able to earn commission when they buy the invoices from the MSMEs. So this is basically a win-win-win situation for all the stakeholders. So let's understand as to what the new amendment is all about. See, so far with respect to financiers, in the TReDS platform, we had only two categories of financiers. That is one, banks, and a specific category of NBFCs known as the NBFC factors. Now these NBFC factors are basically registered with the RBI, and only those categories of NBFCs which have been categorized as the NBFC factors, they were allowed to act as financiers on the TReDS platform. Now, for example, we have different categories of NBFCs such as the investment and credit company, infrastructure finance company, housing finance companies, and so on. Right now, these NBFCs as such are not allowed to act as financiers on the TReDS platform. So because of such a restriction, right now, apart from the banks, we have hardly around 7 NBFCs which have been categorized as NBFC factors which act as a financiers. The other categories of NBFCs are not able to act as financiers. And this is in turn reducing the overall option for the MSMEs to sell their invoices. So right now they can sell off their invoices to only the banks, and more importantly, only 7 NBFCs which have been categorized as the NBFC factors. They are not allowed to sell their invoices to the other categories of NBFCs. So this is severely constraining the options for the MSMEs. Hence, in order to improve the options for the MSMEs, now through the amendment, we have opened up this TReDS platform to the other categories of NBFCs as well. So now the Reserve Bank of India has been empowered to come out with the detailed guidelines, and through these detailed guidelines, the RBI can decide as to which all categories of NBFCs can act as financiers on the TReDS platform. So the overall option or the intention behind the new amendment bill is to enhance the scope of NBFCs to which the MSMEs can sell their invoices. So it is expected that as we have more number of financiers on the TReDS platform, it will give a huge fillip to the sale of invoices by the MSMEs. It will enable the MSMEs to raise immediate cash against the invoices and hence give a boost to the MSME sector. So this is what you must understand from the perspective of the new amendment bill passed by the Indian Parliament. Now let us have a look at the prelims based question for the practice. Look at the first question. The question here is, which among the following statements related to the invoice factoring in India is incorrect? See, in the options here, you can come across a term known as reverse factoring. So please try to find out as to what do you mean by the reverse factoring and let us know in the comments section. And also please let us know the answer to this particular prelims question. The same goes even with the prelims MCQ number 2 as well. So please let us know the answer for these two prelims questions for practice. With this, let us now take up the next article. The next article appears on page number 1. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS paper 2, polity and governance. See, recently the Ministry of Home Affairs has issued an order to appoint Mr. Rakesh Asthana as the Delhi Police Commissioner. Now, this particular appointment of the Delhi Police Commissioner has in turn created a controversy. Recently, the Delhi Assembly has passed a resolution against the appointment of Delhi Police Commissioner. So let's try to understand as to what has caused this friction between the centre and the elected government of Delhi. See, if you look at the DGP of a state, it is considered to be the most high profile post in a particular state. The DGP heads a state police force. He or she acts as a link between the elected government and the state police. More importantly, it is being said that the overall independence and autonomy of DGP in turn determines the independence of police. That is, if the office of DGP enjoys independence, if he enjoys autonomy, if he or she is able to function in an unbiased and neutral manner, automatically the police force would also be neutral as well as unbiased. Hence, in order to ensure the independence and autonomy of the police forces, the Supreme Court came out with the guidelines in the Prakash Singh Badal case. And as you know, under these guidelines, the Supreme Court sought to introduce the police reforms in the state. More specifically, with respect to appointment of DGP, the Supreme Court laid on a guideline that if a particular person is appointed as DGP, such a person should enjoy a minimum tenure of 2 years. However, this particular Supreme Court judgment in the Prakash Singh Badal case, even though it was followed in letter, but it was not followed in spirit. Now, for example, let's say there is a senior IPS officer who is set to retire in the next 2 days. Ideally, such senior IPS officers should not be chosen as DGP. This is so because if they are chosen as DGP, automatically they will get an extension for 2 more years. And quite often, the state governments can misuse this particular provision to appoint a particular IPS officer on political considerations. Hence, in order to end this kind of favoritism and nepotism with respect to appointment of DGP, the Supreme Court then came up with the guidelines in the year 2018. According to these guidelines, first and foremost, the state government should send a list of senior-most police officers to UPSC. And once the list is received by the UPSC, UPSC should prepare a panel of 3 names. Now these 3 names are then forwarded to the concerned state government. So the state government can choose any of these 3 persons to become the DGP of a particular state government. But here, in order to ensure that the state governments do not appoint a particular person as DGP on his last day of his retirement, the Supreme Court came up with an additional guideline here. The Supreme Court said that the officers who have at least 2 years of service left, only those IPS officers should be considered for the post of DGP. Now, for example, let's say here the state government has sent a list of senior-most police officers, and one among them is a senior police officer who has, say, only 1 year left for his service. Now, according to the Supreme Court guideline, such a senior-most police officer should not be chosen as a DGP, because if he is chosen as DGP, automatically he'll get an extension of another 1 more year. And in some of the cases, the state governments can give such an extension based upon the political considerations. Hence, in order to avoid such a problem, the Supreme Court simply said that only those senior police officers who have at least 2 years of service left, they should be considered for the post of DGP. But this particular Supreme Court guideline in turn raised certain concerns. Now let's take the example of this particular senior officer who has only 1 year of service left. Now this senior police officer must have served the police force with utmost integrity, honesty, and must have taken actions in an unbiased and neutral manner. But because the Supreme Court guideline that a senior officer should have at least 2 years of service left, this senior officer may not get appointed as DGP. Accordingly, the Supreme Court then modified its guidelines issued in the year 2018. It came up with the new guidelines in the year 2019. As per the new guidelines, the Supreme Court now it has said that those senior officers who have at least 6 months of service left should be considered for the post of DGP. So here, this senior officer who has at least 1 year of service left would automatically get considered for the post of DGP. Against this particular background, the Delhi Assembly has recently passed a resolution against the Ministry of Home Affairs order. Now, as you know, the Ministry of Home Affairs has recently issued an order to appoint the Delhi Police Commissioner. Now, this is quite important because, as you know, Delhi is not a full-fledged state. And more importantly, police as a subject, in case of Delhi, it comes under the center. So in accordance with the powers vested with the center, the Ministry of Home Affairs has appointed Mr. Rakesh Asthana as the Delhi Police Commissioner. Against this particular appointment, the Delhi Assembly has passed a resolution. Now, what are the concerns raised by the Delhi Assembly? First and foremost, the Delhi Assembly has highlighted that whatever process we are following for the appointment of DGP of a particular state, the same process should be applied even for the appointment of the Delhi Police Commissioner as well. In particular, the Delhi Assembly has highlighted the Supreme Court guideline with respect to the appointment of officers who have at least 6 months of service left as DGP. Now, in case of Mr. Rakesh Asthana, he is set to retire on July 31st, 2021. That means he is set to retire in the next 2 to 3 days. So when he is appointed as Delhi Police Commissioner, automatically he gets an extension for another 2 more years. Now the Delhi Assembly feels that this appointment of Delhi Police Commissioner is based upon the political considerations. And that is why the Delhi Assembly has passed this resolution against the appointment of the Delhi Police Commissioner. See, keeping aside the politics, let us try to understand as to what extent various state governments in case of India have complied with the Supreme Court guidelines on the appointment of DGP. Understanding of this particular aspect will help you to write an answer to this particular mains question for practice. See, with respect to appointment of DGP, apart from the Supreme Court, various other police commissions have also laid down their norms. These include the National Police Commission, Padmanabhaya Committee, Rebero Committee, and so on. So let us try to understand as to what extent these norms have been followed by the state governments. Now, these particular aspects I have already discussed in the DNS dated 22nd of April 2021. So I am discussing this once again for the benefit of your revision. The first aspect is with respect to shortlisting of candidates. See, as discussed before, ideally, the state government should send a list of senior-most police officers to the UPSC. UPSC then, based upon seniority as well as merit, should prepare a panel of 3 names. And out of these 3 names, the state government should choose one person to be appointed as the DGP. Ideally, this is a procedure that should be followed. But it has been observed that in most of the state governments, this procedure has not been observed. The state governments on their own, they are preparing a panel of names, and on their own, out of the names which they have decided, they choose one person to go on to become the DGP. So this norm has been violated. The second aspect is with respect to the State Security Commission. See, the idea of the State Security Commission is to ensure that when a particular person is appointed as DGP, such a person should be appointed based upon a broad-based consensus among multiple stakeholders. Now, for example, according to Supreme Court, the State Security Commission must include the government representatives, the leader of opposition in Legislative Assembly, and certain independent members. But it has been seen that even though the state governments have constituted the State Security Commission, the State Security Commission in most of the state governments have come to be dominated by the government. So they have not given due representation to the independent members. The next aspect is with respect to appointment. Usually a person should be appointed as DGP based upon his seniority as well as merit. But it is mostly seen that a person is appointed as DGP based upon the political considerations. The next aspect is with respect to tenure. See, security of tenure is considered to be a cornerstone of good governance. Ideally, when a person is appointed as DGP, he must be given a security of tenure. Ideally, he must be allowed to serve for a minimum of 2 to 3 years. But usually it is seen that these people are removed before their completion of their tenure. So this in turn leads to politicization of the office of DGP. And the last one is with respect to removal. Now, for example, if the DGP is to be removed before the end of his tenure, then the prior approval should be taken from the State Security Commission. But usually such approvals are not taken. So as you can see, even the Supreme Court of India has laid down elaborate rules, elaborate guidelines in order to ensure the independence and autonomy of the DGP. However, these norms have been violated by the various state governments, which in turn has led to the growing politicization of the office of the State Police Chief. With this, let us now take up the next article. The next article appears on page number 14. The article is titled as High Fiscal Borrowings Won't Crowd Out the Private Sector. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Indian Economy. See, the COVID-19 pandemic, it is considered to be a once-in-a-century crisis. Indian economy has registered a negative GDP growth rate of minus 7.5% in the previous financial year. COVID-19 has also adversely affected the government's finances. On one hand, the overall revenue collected by the government has got reduced, while on the other hand, the overall expenditure obligations of the government has increased. So here, if the Indian economy has to come out of recession, the government is required to provide fiscal stimulus. Accordingly, the government is set to borrow huge amount of money. For example, in the recent budget, the finance minister has announced that the government would borrow approximately around rupees 12 lakh crore from the market. In this regard, recently a SEBI member has highlighted that the higher borrowings by the government may actually crowd out the private sector investment. Against this particular opinion, the chief economic advisor has highlighted that rather than crowding out the private sector investment, the higher government borrowings would actually crowd in the private sector investment. So, keeping this particular article in mind, let's understand as to what would become important from the perspective of the prelims examination. See, for the perspective of prelims, you should be aware about the interest rate growth differential and the concept of crowd in and crowd out effect. As far as the mains examination is concerned, you should know about the relationship between the public debt and the GDP growth rate. Now, all of these aspects which are important for the perspective of the UPSC examination have already been covered in the economic survey. In this year's economic survey, we had a separate chapter which discussed as to what is the nature of relationship between public debt and the GDP growth rate. So basically, it sought answers to various questions such as, should a country borrow money? And if it is borrowing money, for what purpose should it use the borrowed money? And should there be a limit on the government's borrowings? So it has basically sought to answer these three questions as to whether the government should borrow money, for what purpose the money should be borrowed, and whether there should be a limit on the government's borrowings. So overall, the chapter in this year's economic survey has discussed about the debt sustainability of the Indian economy. See, I have already discussed this particular chapter as part of the economic survey discussion. The video of this particular discussion is already uploaded on the YouTube. So I suggest all of you to go through this particular chapter from this year's economic survey so that you have a better idea of all of these aspects which are important for the perspective of the UPSC examination. My idea of this particular discussion is not to repeat the discussion of the economic survey once again. My idea of this particular discussion in the DNS is to discuss the approach to answer writing to this particular question. See, the question here is, deviation from the fiscal deficit targets is a necessary evil during the current economic scenario. Justify this statement with the relevant arguments. So as part of my discussion, I will discuss as to how should you approach the answer to this particular question along with the model answer. So in case if any of you have not gone through this particular chapter from the economic survey, please click on the link and go through this particular chapter. Now, before understanding the suggested answer structure to this particular question, let us first understand as to what exactly is the demand of the question. What are you required to write in the answer of this particular question? See, during the normal times, there is a direct relationship between the fiscal deficit and the GDP growth rate. If the fiscal deficit is higher, this would lead to macroeconomic instability. It will crowd out the private sector investment. It will lead to a downgrade in the sovereign credit ratings. So we will be able to attract less amount of FDI, FPI. It will lead to lower amount of investment, and hence this can affect the long-term GDP growth rate. That is why, as you know, under the FRBM Act, we have laid on a limit on the fiscal deficit targets. So ideally, the fiscal deficit in case of India should be at 3%. And this was a target which is supposed to be met by the end of March 2021. But this year, the target has been exceeded, and that is why the government is set to come up with a new amendment to the FRBM Act. Anyways, here, as you can see, if you are able to maintain the fiscal deficit at a lower end, automatically we would be in a position to promote higher GDP growth rate. So during normal times, having a lower fiscal deficit would ensure fiscal discipline on behalf of the government. It would ensure that the government rationalizes its expenditure. It will lead to improvement in tax to GDP ratio and so on. But what about the exceptional times as we are seeing right now? See, as discussed, the COVID-19 pandemic has led to twin shocks. It has led to decrease in both demand as well as supply. Both investment as well as consumption expenditure have got adversely affected, and that is why we call it as a twin shock. Now, during such economic circumstances, should we actually focus on fiscal deficit? Should we try to reduce the fiscal deficit? Now, you must understand here that if you are trying to reduce the fiscal deficit, if you are trying to meet the fiscal deficit target of 3%, this can actually prove to be counterproductive. Rather than coming out of recession, the economic recession in case of India could get prolonged. Now, for example, in order to limit the fiscal deficit, the government would be required to reduce its borrowings. It may be forced to increase the tax to GDP ratio, decrease its expenditure. All of these would mean that the government would be forced to adopt the pro-cyclical fiscal policy. So here, rather than coming out of the recession, the economic recession would get prolonged. That is why there is a need to deviate from the fiscal deficit target. So if you look at the question here, it says that deviation for the fiscal deficit target is a necessary evil during the current economic scenario. Justify the statement with relevant arguments. So basically here, the primary dimension or the primary requirement of this question is to come out with logical arguments as to why should India deviate from the fiscal deficit targets. That is why India should not be worried about the fiscal deficit. How increase in fiscal deficit will help us to come out of the economic recession. That is what you are basically required to argue. But obviously here, you cannot start off your answer with this particular aspect, that is with the primary dimension. This primary dimension of the answer has to be in turn supported by other secondary dimensions. So what can be those other secondary dimensions? Let's understand this part. See, whenever you read a question in the UPSC mains examination, always first and foremost try to identify the central theme or the central premise of the question. Now here, upon reading the question, you will get to know that the central theme of the question is the relationship between the fiscal deficit and the GDP growth rate. And as discussed, the primary dimension or the primary focus of this particular question is to examine as to how higher fiscal deficit can have a positive impact on the Indian economy. So basically here you are required to argue as to why India should exceed the fiscal deficit target to deal with the present economic crisis. So this is a primary dimension. Now this primary dimension can in turn be supported by the other secondary dimensions. For example, if you read the question carefully, in the question you have this particular word, that is current economic scenario. Now what is the current economic scenario? The current economic scenario is denoted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So the COVID-19 pandemic has led to a kind of dilemma before the government, wherein the dilemma here is, should the government stick to the fiscal deficit target under the FRBM Act, or should it focus upon the fiscal stimulus? This can be a secondary dimension to substantiate your primary dimension. The other secondary dimension here could be, what are the adverse impact of higher fiscal deficit on Indian economy, and why do we need a limit on the fiscal deficit? Now when you write these things, you'll be able to prove that the higher fiscal deficit, especially during the normal times, it can be an evil. That means a higher fiscal deficit during normal times can actually reduce the GDP growth rate. Having mentioned that, in the next part, if you are able to mention as to why higher fiscal deficit is right now needed, there you'll be able to argue as to why higher fiscal deficit is a necessity to deal with the current economic crisis. So with respect to this part, if you are able to come up with at least 4 to 5 arguments, you will be able to do justice to this particular answer. Apart from that, as suggested by the economic survey, if the government is exceeding the fiscal deficit target, the government must ensure that the higher percent of borrowed money should be used for creation of capital assets. This would ensure that the IRGD value for India remains negative, and hence the public debt would be sustainable in the long run. Now this can be a kind of way forward to this particular answer. Now once you identify as to what all dimensions can be written while writing the answer, the structuring of the answer will become quite easier. For example, your introduction can actually start off with this particular aspect as to what kind of dilemma has arisen before the government because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then in the first part of the body of the answer, you can start off with the first part wherein you are required to highlight as to how higher fiscal deficit can become evil during the normal times. And in the second part of the body of the answer, you should highlight as to why higher fiscal deficit is a necessity to deal with the current economic crisis. Then lastly, in your conclusion, you can write this as a kind of way forward. So when you are able to find out as to what all dimensions you must write while writing an answer, automatically the structuring of the answer will become much more easier. Further, when you are writing an answer for the Indian Economy GS paper 3, always try to substantiate your answer by taking support of the budget, committee reports, case studies, diagrams if they are needed, diagrams or flowcharts, economic survey recommendations, and more importantly, facts and figures. So try to incorporate all of these aspects in order to get a competitive edge over the others. So keeping this in mind, let us try to understand the suggested answer to this particular question. So coming to the introduction here, see, ideally your introduction should be simple, crisp and to the point. You should not be very verbose. Ideally, your introduction should be within 10 to 15% of the word limit which has been assigned to a particular question. So this particular answer has to be written in 250 words. So ideally, your introduction in this particular case should be between 25 to 40 words and not more than 40 words. So as you can see in this particular introduction, I basically highlighted the kind of dilemma before the government. So the introduction reads as, the FRBM Act 2003 requires the government to maintain the fiscal deficit target of 3% to ensure the fiscal discipline. However, during the exceptional times such as the COVID-19, such reasonable targets can force the government to adopt the pro-cyclical fiscal policy and hence prolong the economic revival. So as you can see in this introduction, we have basically opened up the debate. We have opened up the debate and highlighted both the sides of the coin. On one hand, we have highlighted that lower fiscal deficit would ensure the fiscal discipline, while on the other hand, we have highlighted that if we stick to fiscal deficit target during the present economic crisis, then we would be forced to adopt the pro-cyclical fiscal policy and hence the economic revival would get prolonged. As far as the body of the answer is concerned, in the first part of the body of the answer, we are basically highlighting as to why we need a limit on the fiscal deficit. So here we are basically highlighting that higher fiscal deficit is basically an evil in the Indian economy. So this is one part of the debate which we have highlighted in the first part of the body. In order to further substantiate the first part of the body of the answer, we can incorporate this particular flowcharts or the diagrams. So this will enrich your answer. In the next part of the body of the answer, we have highlighted that during the abnormal times such as the COVID-19, the government needs to adopt the counter-cyclical fiscal policy and hence restrictions on the fiscal deficit can hinder the economic revival. So even though increase in fiscal deficit can have long-term adverse consequences, that is, fiscal deficit can be a necessary evil, but there is a need for us to deviate from the fiscal deficit targets on account of the following reasons. Now I can mention 4 to 5 reasons here. For example, unprecedented times, sticking to fiscal deficit target can be counterproductive. Increase in the fiscal deficit is a key to the economic revival, and higher fiscal deficit is not a matter of concern as highlighted by the economic survey. I hope all of you would be able to read and understand all of these points on your own. And as far as the conclusion is concerned, see here the conclusion should be a kind of way forward. Apart from that, you must also offer certain suggestions. For example, here you can write that, as rightly pointed out by the Economic Survey 2020-21, the government need not be worried about the higher fiscal deficit to provide the fiscal stimulus. But as a point of caution or as a point of suggestion, here you can write that at the same time, there is a need to ensure a higher quality of fiscal deficit by increasing the capital expenditure and reducing the share of the revenue expenditure. Necessary amendments would have to be introduced in the FRBM Act 2003. Now, if you look at the FRBM Act 2003, it basically focuses on reducing the fiscal deficit to 3% of India's GDP. But the problem here is the FRBM Act does not focus on enhancing the quality of fiscal deficit. It does not focus on ensuring that a higher part of our borrowings should be used for capital expenditure rather than the revenue expenditure. So that is why we have to introduce the necessary amendments in the FRBM Act 2003 to increase the quality of fiscal deficit. So this is how you must approach the answer to this particular question. See, if you have a look at today's editorial page, you would get to know that most of the articles in today's editorial page have already been covered by us in our previous DNS videos. For example, on page number 6, you have a lead article in the form of the Pegasus spyware. Now, various aspects related to this particular article has already been covered by us in the DNS dated 20th of July 2021. See, with respect to this particular article, you should know basically two things. One, threats posed by the Pegasus spyware, and secondly, the cyber security framework in case of India, its challenges and the strategies needed. These aspects have been covered in the DNS dated 20th of July 2021. The second article appears on page number 7 in the form of data point. This article talks about the highlights of the recently published Periodic Labour Force Survey report. I have covered the highlights of this particular report in the Indian Express Explained section for the 4th week of July 2021. The next article appears on page number 6. This article talks about various concerns and challenges with respect to anti-trafficking bill. Once again, this aspect has been covered by us in the DNS dated 18th of July 2021. This article was covered by Jatin sir. So since most of the articles in today's editorial page have already been covered by us, that is why I have not chosen any of the articles from the editorial page. The links to these articles have been provided in the description box below. So in case any of you have not gone through these DNS videos, you can click on these links and you can go through these important articles. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Now the answer to the question that was asked in yesterday's DNS is option A.